Hi guys! Alright, this video is an introduction to SKUgrid. So there's going to be more videos about SKUgrid because there's a whole lot you can do with it, but I figured I'd kind of just show you how to navigate through it and talk a little bit about it, okay? So first off, when you go to SKUgrid.com, this is the page that you're going to see, and it's going to talk about pricing, and you can scroll down and see a bunch of information about it. I'm just going to show you what it actually looks like to work in SKUgrid and talk a little bit about how it works. So when you log in, first you're going to see all these buttons up top, and this part is going to stay the same. It's going to say processing, and this is going to stay like this for a while. It's something that you just kind of get used to. SKUgrid is not very quick working software, unfortunately, so that's one of the reasons that I don't really ever do anything manually in SKUgrid. All of my items are in SKUgrid because I use HydraLister to list the items, and HydraLister automatically adds them to SKUgrid. So wow, that wasn't bad. Usually it takes longer, but I rarely have to actually look and search for anything in SKUgrid, and it has gotten faster than it used to be. So let's scroll down a little bit so I can show you guys. You can see we have the picture of the item, and then some information about the supplier, and then the link to the item. So the supplier link here, if I click this, it'll take a link to where the item is being sold. So where I'm getting the item from, and that's where SKUgrid pulls the price and all that kind of stuff. But we don't really need to know too much about this. I'm just showing you guys a tour, right? So if you want to add an individual item, you scroll down to the bottom here. And then you need some information about the listing, where it's coming from, that kind of thing. And then you click add item at the bottom. So if you don't want to scroll all the way down, you can also just click on add single item, and then it'll just quickly take you to the bottom of the page, right? So now we know how to look at stuff. We know how to add individual items, but then there's a lot of settings, that have to be talked about. But before we get too much into those, let's look at our advanced. Okay, yeah, let's just talk to you about each of these individual buttons, okay? So the add single item button, you just saw what that did. Batch options allows you to issue SKUgrid commands that it will then execute on all of your items, okay? So these options are force items, all items to reprice. So this is kind of like, keep in mind, this is going to use up credits. Oh, and I should talk to you about credits. Okay, that's a much more important thing, actually. So we're going to go look at the subscription section here. SKUgrid works by using credits. Every time you check an item, it uses a credit. Every time SKUgrid performs a task, it uses a credit. So the more kind of workload you give SKUgrid, the more expensive it is. And you can change your settings, for example, so that you only check the item once every day. That's going to be much cheaper than checking the item once every 2 hours. In fact, it's going to be 12 times cheaper, which is quite a lot, right? So it's kind of misleading when you go to the subscriptions area because it makes it look like it's a monthly fee. And it is true that you set up a subscription with SKUgrid for a once a month kind of transaction, right? You'll get charged $30 a month or $120 a month or whatever. You can also make one-time purchases. But in reality, that's just a system to reload your account with credits. It's kind of like reloading your phone or something. Like if you use your credits up, you're going to have to pay before your month has passed, right? Just because you pay $30 for the month doesn't mean you have SKUgrid for the month. That just means that you have 250,000 worth credits, and you'll go through those in a period of time, right? And the same goes for if you overdo your credits. Say that you are paying for 10,000 or 250,000 credits every month, but you're only using 100,000 of them. It doesn't make sense for you to subscribe to a monthly fee because you're going to be aggregating more and more and more credits that you're not even using, so what's the point in paying for them, right? So I really encourage people to do just like one-time purchases of credits, even though you're saving money, until you know how much credits you use, right? So I use tons of credits because I have a really big account, so I usually purchase like 2.5 million credits. Yeah. So let's go back to, now I've explained how the subscription thing works. So you have credits that you use up, and SKUgrid uses those credits whenever it checks an item. So now back on this page, we were at this batch options setting. So you can force all the items to reprice, and I don't actually know what the difference between force all items to reprice is and start repricing on all is. So there's a lot I need to learn about this, but my understanding is that SKUgrid will check your items at certain times of the day. If you have your settings set up so that it checks once every 12 hours, then you could click this button now to just force all of your items to reprice right now. And this is going to use up more credits, but if you just put in new pricing or something, maybe you want to do that so that your pricing gets updated in all of your files, right? Same kind of thing with recheck. This is just going to check all of your stock and that kind of thing. And then remove all compare items. I'll get more into compare items later, but you don't really need to worry about that too much. So this is all the batch options. Now let's talk about the import and export section. So you have the ability to... SKUgrid is a database of your items, right? So you can get SKUgrid to give you a copy of that database, and then you can make changes in it and then put that database back into SKUgrid. So basically what you do is you pull the database out of SKUgrid, and then you wipe SKUgrid so it has nothing in it, and then you make your changes to the database, and then you upload the database back into SKUgrid. This is called compare CSV, right? So you'll export the copy of the CSV file and then import it back in. This is a good workaround for the fact that doing things one by one in SKUgrid takes forever. It's often faster to work with the direct CSV file itself because you can change things, you know, as fast as you can change them, and then you just do an upload or a couple uploads to SKUgrid and everything's bueno. For most of you, you're only going to need to upload it once, right? I have to do multiple uploads because I have 80,000 items, but most people don't post that many items, so they don't have to worry about it. And the import from Marketplace, I think, allows you to, it imports all of your items from your eBay store, but then you will have to go through. So what you would do, let's say that you just got SKUgrid and you have 200 items on your eBay store, but you don't have them in SKUgrid. The way that you would do that is you would go here and you would click on import your items from eBay US. That's going to make a database on SKUgrid of all of the items that you have for sale on eBay. And then what you would do is export your database into a Google Sheet file or a CSV file to use in Microsoft Excel. And then you would add all of your supplier URLs to those items, and then you would save that, you would wipe your SKUgrid database, and then re-upload the database back into SKUgrid, and from that point, all your inventory would be monitored. So that's how you do this. If you don't use HydroLister, then you have to use the import, export, and all that kind of stuff. But if you use HydroLister, you never really need to worry about it, okay? So we've talked about import, export. Let's see what the advanced items are. So advanced purge all items is what I was talking about earlier. Once you've exported your database away from SKUgrid, then you need to delete the database on SKUgrid so that when you re-upload it, it's not making duplicates of everything, right? So you would click this button, and that would delete your entire SKUgrid account. And if you accidentally clicked that, then you could click Restore Deleted Items here. And then we have multi-item actions. Multi-item actions are specific to the items that you have selected with this little checkbox here. If you look on the far right here, there's this checkbox. So you'll see all of these are grayed out except the select all. So I can select everything on the page and then deselect everything. See, that just selected all the checkboxes. And we can deselect them. And if we want to mess with a couple items, let's say we want to delete these items for whatever reason, we can go through and find all the items we don't like or whatever, and then scroll back up here, and then we could delete the selected items, force reprice them, or do any of these commands onto just the items that we selected. So multi-item actions are for a selection of items, whereas batch options are for everything in your whole database, right? Multi-item actions are limited to everything on the current page. So now let's talk about the current page, because you can show 50 items on a page, 100 items on a page, 250, 500, or 1,000. I have it set to 50 just because I think that it loads faster. But for the sake of argument, let's see if I max it and set it to 1,000. Let's see how quick it loads, because I noticed recently that this actually didn't seem to affect the load speed that much, which is unusual to me, because you would think it would, take way longer to load 1,000 items versus 50. So in general, I recommend that you have this set at 50, because then you're only looking at a small fraction of them, whereas when it's 1,000, there's tons, and it's going to lag a bit more, that kind of thing. But let's see how true that is right now. you guys have a pretty decent sense of how long it took to load earlier, and it was like maybe a minute. So we'll see how long it takes to load these pages. Wow, look at that. Just loaded 1,000 items. Crazy. And that didn't seem to take that much longer. What's interesting, it doesn't seem to have a whole lot to do with the number of items that it's showing you. It's more about the current load on SKUgrid's servers, right? So right now, I guess SKUgrid doesn't have a whole lot of load on its servers. It's loading things very quickly. But I would recommend that you usually have this at 50. But that doesn't really matter a whole lot. Okay, so we've talked about our settings a little bit, how to interact with SKUgrid, and I'll do another video in the course about how to set up your pricing with SKUgrid and how to mess with the kind of one-time settings where you just do these once and then afterwards, you just interact with SKUgrid, right? You don't need to change your repricing every day, that kind of thing. You just kind of figure out what you want and then you only change it when you're trying to change the prices of all of your items, right? And so that's what I use SKUgrid the most for on the website is when I'm experimenting with new pricing like I'm doing right now. Whenever I make a pricing change to SKUgrid, I go into here, and then I go to my settings, and then I change it, and then next time it checks my items, it will update to the new pricing format. So it doesn't all do it straight away, but I could make it all do it straight away just by clicking that Force All Items to Reprice button after changing my pricing. But that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoy. Ciao!